Welcome to Sci-Fi Sounds, where imagination meets sound. Dive into a world of audio short stories where each tale transports you to distant galaxies, unknown dimensions, and alternate realities. From pulse-pounding sci-fi adventures to thought-provoking futuristic mysteries, we craft worlds with nothing but the power of sound and storytelling. Tune in, close your eyes, and let your mind wander. Your journey into the unknown begins here with Sci-Fi Sounds. The ventilation in the Red Sky Embassy security lounge made a sound like a dying rodent chewing through tinfoil. Somewhere in the ceiling, something sparked. Again. Taggart didn't flinch. He tossed a pair of jacks onto the fold-out table and leaned back in his dented chair. One boot braced against the wall beside a cracked emergency panel. A toothpick twitched in the corner of his mouth like it was daring someone to comment on it. "Fold," he said. "Lies," muttered Nessa, squinting at him through the purple smoke of her vape. She blew a ring in the general direction of Clutch, who was upside down on the ceiling again, chewing absent-mindedly on a length of exposed wiring. Sparks dripped from his mandibles like metal snowflakes. Hal sat stiffly at the edge of the table, hands steepled, sweating. His chips were arranged in precise stacks sorted by denomination and color gradient. He blinked. "I think I'll call." "Oh, good," Taggart said dryly. "This should be educational." Nessa smirked, her eyes flicking toward the monitor behind them, which displayed a frozen feed of the docking bay camera looped from 3 days ago. "What are we playing for this time? Coffee rations or the last box of cheddar sim cubes?" "Dignity," Taggart said. "So Hal's already out." "I'm still in," Hal chirped too loudly. He laid down his cards with a hopeful smile, an uneven straight, and looked around for approval. Nessa laid down hers next, and with a lazy flourish, Taggart dropped his jacks. Clutch let out a series of low-frequency clicking noises, followed by a sudden tsh as a blue spark jumped from the ceiling conduit. A plume of coolant hissed from a nearby vent, frosting the edge of the table. I think Clutch just bit through the coolant line again," Hal said nervously. Taggart sighed and began collecting chips. "Then you better win next hand so you can afford gloves." Hal stood up and wiped his palms on his uniform. "Guys, maybe we should check the dispatch terminal? I just saw a blinking alert light. Orange. Or maybe red-orange?" "You saw a blinking light?" Nessa said, not looking up. "Congratulations. You're officially the most alert person in this room." Hal jogged over to the far wall, past a lopsided hollow banner that read, "Welcome delegates, function unknown," and tapped frantically at a smudged touchscreen. It flickered, buzzed, and then produced a slowly scrolling diplomatic file. Guys, this is real." No one moved. Hal turned, his voice hitting a new register. "A Class T diplomatic envoy is on its way. Here, our station, estimated arrival 42 minutes. Taggart squinted at him. "You read that wrong." "Nope, definitely not. It's signed by a galactic chancellor. There's a triple seal priority code and a diplomatic escort ID. This isn't spam." Nessa frowned. "That can't be right. We're Red Sky. We're a junk post. No one with a functioning organ visits here on purpose." Clutch dropped from the ceiling and thudded to the ground, clicking thoughtfully. "I ate the coolant tube. It was warm." Taggart pushed his chair back slowly and stood, scratching his stubbled jaw. "Let me see that." He scanned the dispatch file. His eyes narrowed. "You've got to be kidding me. This was supposed to go to Red Spiral Embassy, not us." "Well, they sent it to us," Hal said, now frantically brushing dust off his wrinkled blazer. "And we can't send it back without committing a breach of protocol. It says diplomatic immunity required for disengagement. I think that means we have to. Fake competence?" Nessa said. "I'm in." The lounge erupted into sudden chaos. Clutch galloped off down the hallway on all 6 limbs, trailing coolant. Nessa darted toward the cleaning drone cabinet with a crowbar. Hal began practicing his bow in the cracked reflection of a window. Taggart just groaned and grabbed his stun pistol from the locker. "All right," he muttered. "Let's make this place look not like the ass end of a prison riot." An hour later, the docking bay smelled like lemon-scented floor polish and desperation. The crew stood in a rough line beneath a flickering overhead light, every one of them in some stage of regret. Taggart wore a half-buttoned uniform with a suspicious ketchup stain shaped like a skull. Nessa had managed to reroute a decorative waterfall into the lavatory to make it appear more regal. Clutch stood proudly beside a throne-like chair he'd welded together out of old chair parts, gas canisters, and one unfortunate vending machine. Hal adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and checked the countdown on his wrist display. "They'll be docking in 30 seconds. "We still don't know who they are," Nessa whispered, showing Taggart the redacted data file. "Everything above clearance level 9 is blacked out. Species unknown. Name censored. Purpose of visit diplomatic transit. This smells wrong." "Everything here smells wrong," Taggart replied. Outside the bay windows, a sleek shuttle glided into view, all curves and silver plating like a fish made of moonlight. It hummed as it docked, and the bay doors shuddered open with a groan that made everyone wince. Fog hissed in, lights dimmed, and then he appeared, tall, gliding, cloaked in translucent layers of color-shifting fabric. His skin shimmered with opalescent hues, and his eyes, if they were eyes, glowed faintly in the fog. The figure stepped forward, stopped just short of Hal, and spoke in a voice like a violin string being gently bowed in zero gravity. "Which of you," the figure said, "is responsible for my protection?" Hal raised a trembling hand. Taggart lowered it for him and stepped forward. "That'd be me, Lieutenant Taggart. Welcome to the Red Sky Embassy." The alien's expression didn't change. He looked at Taggart as if he were an interestingly shaped mollusk. Then, finally, he bowed. "I am Glox of Ralzeth," he said. "And if I may be so bold, I believe someone is already trying to kill me." Taggart exhaled through his nose. "Of course they are," he said. "It's Tuesday." Glox didn't so much walk as float, his feet or foot equivalents barely brushing the floor of the docking bay as he moved. His robes trailed behind him like bioluminescent mist. Hal trailed behind him, stumbling over every fourth step and sweating through his collar. "We extend our deepest gratitudinal honorings for your glorious presencings," Hal stammered, reading poorly from a palm-sized notepad. Glox turned to look at him with slow, deliberate grace. "Young human," he said softly, "your language is oddly shaped." Hal beamed as if he'd been knighted. "I wrote that myself." Taggart led the way down the corridor toward the ambassadorial wing, muttering over his shoulder. "Don't engage the guests, Hal. They might think we're competent." Behind them, Clutch lumbered along silently, his four rear limbs carrying a towering stack of Glox's bizarre organic luggage. One suitcase squelched, another occasionally hissed steam. One had eyes. Nessa brought up the rear, tablet in hand, frowning at the guest redacted data file as it slowly decrypted line by line. "There's no species file on him, no known threats, no allergies, not even a stool sample. He might as well be a ghost." "Is that normal?" Hal asked. "It's about as normal as putting a royal escort in a broken vending machine with a security team made of war criminals and unpaid interns." "Hey," Taggart snapped. "I got paid once. Briefly. In munitions." They reached the VIP suite. The automatic door wheezed, then stuck. Taggart kicked it. It opened with a mechanical sigh. Inside was a room meant to impress, synthetic silk drapes, stained, a starfield projection on the ceiling stuck on daytime Mars, and a bed shaped like a crescent moon, missing one leg, propped up on a traffic cone. Clutch gently deposited the luggage onto the bed, causing it to collapse with a theatrical crunch. Glock stood in the doorway, utterly unreadable. Then he stepped inside, turned once, and said, "This will suffice." Nessa nudged Taggart. "That's the interstellar equivalent of, 'What the hell is this?'" "I've heard worse, usually during inspections." Glox drifted over to the window and placed one long-fingered hand against the glass. The soft chime of distant station ships drifted through the paneling, mingling with the endless hum of the failing climate control. Taggart cleared his throat. "We'll be outside if you need us. Security's tight, local perimeter clear, docking bay logs scrubbed. You should be safe here." Glox didn't turn. Safe, a flexible word. Taggart narrowed his eyes. "You expecting trouble?" There was a long pause. Then Glock said almost offhandedly, "I was told my enemies would not find me here." Hal perked up. "Enemies?" "Several," Glock said. Nessa leaned against the wall. "And are these enemies the kind to send a stern letter, or are we talking plasma-level problems?" Instead of answering, Glox turned to face them fully. "I am not entirely as I appear." "Wonderful," Taggart said flatly. "That's never ominous." "I mean," Glox continued, with what might have been a smile, or a shift in the bioluminescence of his face, you should expect difficulty. At that precise moment, the lights flickered again. Then a low alarm began to hum from the ceiling panel. Not a major one, just a quiet red pulse labeled unauthorized internal energy discharge detected. Taggart cursed. Nessa whipped open her tablet. It's coming from the East Hall, Maintenance Shaft 6. No registered personnel in that section. Of course, Taggart growled. He turned on his heel. Clutch, with me. Nessa, lock down non-critical corridors. Hal, stay with the prince. Hal paled. Wait, what? Me alone? You're our best shot at annoying an assassin to death. Taggart was already halfway down the corridor, Clutch galloping after him with the joyful clatter of chitin on metal. Nessa tapped furiously at her tablet. Initiating low-grade lockdown. Doors sealed. Motion sensors up. If it sneezes without a badge, I'll know. Hal turned to Glocks. So, do you play any Earth games? We have a lot of really confusing board games? Glocks blinked. What is a Monopoly? Taggart and Clutch reached the shaft just as the lights died completely. The corridor was pitch black except for the flickering readout of Clutch's internal HUD display. His large yellow eyes glowed faintly. Taggart held up his stun pistol. Whoever's down here better start talking before I make new ventilation holes. Something moved, a hiss of compressed gas. Then a silhouette darted behind a junction pipe. Taggart fired once, blue arc lighting up the corridor, striking the wall where a figure had been milliseconds earlier. Clutch lunged with startling speed, his arms extending far beyond what human anatomy would tolerate. He grabbed something by the ankle. A boot. Then came the flash, bright, sudden, blinding, an explosion of light and noise and disorientation. Taggart went down hard, ears ringing, teeth rattling. When his vision cleared, the shaft was empty. The boot was still there, but whatever had worn it was gone. Clutch looked down at the boot, then up at Taggart. I bit them, he said proudly. They tasted like solder and cowardice. Taggart pushed himself up, scowling. That wasn't random. Someone knew where to hit. He touched his earcom. Nessa, intruder just evaded us. Flashbang Clutch, could have gone toward cargo or secondary vents. Nessa's voice crackled. I just picked up a ping on the cargo bay sensors. Might be a feint, or they're already gone. Hal chimed in from the suite. Glocks is asking for a bath made of submerged sonic mist. We don't have that, right? Taggart sighed, stepping over the boot. Tell him to take a nap. We've got problems. Back in the suite, Glocks sat cross-legged on the crushed remains of the diplomatic bed. One of his bags opened itself, emitting a low, warbling chime. Inside, something pulsed. Hal inched closer, squinting. Is that luggage? Or a pet? Glocks didn't look up. It is a message, encoded in phase organic pulses. I must translate it before they do. Hal blinked. They? Glocks slowly turned his gaze toward him. Yes, he said. Whoever is coming next. It was Hal's idea to host a formal welcome dinner. It will reassure the delegation, he'd said, straightening his tie while the others stared at him like he proposed wrestling a black hole. A proper meal demonstrates diplomatic good faith. It also demonstrates we don't know how to say no, Taggart muttered. But once the idea was out, Glocks had agreed instantly and with unsettling enthusiasm. Which is how they found themselves standing in the Red Sky Embassy's ancient, glitchy banquet hall, trying to remember the last time the dining system had been cleaned or rebooted. Smells like old mushrooms and failure, Nessa muttered, spraying a fragrance canister into the air like she was exorcising it. Taggart stood in a corner, arms crossed, watching two maintenance drones try and fail to set a table. One kept stacking plates on top of other plates. The other had mistaken a decorative vase for a punch bowl and filled it with thick purple lubricant. Clutch had cooked. That was a mistake. A long, bubbling dish sat at the center of the table, steaming ominously. It was mostly gray, with green veins running through it like it had grown itself. Nessa poked it with a fork. The fork hissed and melted at the tip. Do I even want to know what that is? She asked. Clutch was polishing glasses with a napkin wrapped around all 6 arms. It is a Cragfolk celebratory paste. I have adjusted for human digestion. Possibly. Hal entered, waving a small hollow tray. I made place cards, personalized. Taggart gave him a look. This one says Tuga Vink. Who the hell is Tuga Vink? That's our guest, Hal said brightly. No, Nessa said, glancing at her data slate. That's Torga Vik. She's from Ralzeth, former guard, current bounty hunter, possibly Glocks' ex. There was a pause. Oh, Hal said. Outside, the guest shuttle was already docking. Torgavik entered the banquet hall like a blade entering flesh, smoothly, confidently, and with a sense of inevitable damage. She was tall, feline in movement, her armor sleek in midnight black with crimson detailing. Her helmet retracted as she stepped into the room, revealing sharp cheekbones, glowing amber eyes, and a smile that could curdle antifreeze. "Darling," she purred, spotting Glock seated calmly at the head of the table. "You look positively unguarded." Taggart stepped between them before he even realized he'd moved. "No weapons at the table," he said. Torga blinked slowly. "Oh, but I was hoping for a bit of carving." Nessa leaned in toward Hal. "Why do all his exes look like boss fights?" Clutch appeared beside Taggart, carrying a tray of steaming mugs. "I made tea. It includes bark. I do not know from where." Everyone took a cup. No one drank. The meal began awkwardly. Glock sat in his usual serene silence, occasionally asking vague questions like, "Does your species shed its moral exoskeleton regularly?" Hal tried to translate. He failed. Taggart ate nothing and watched everything. Nessa picked at something that might have been a tuber or might have been a slow-moving parasite. Torga, to everyone's surprise, actually seemed to enjoy herself. She laughed. She complimented the wine selection, aged in absolute vacuum, bold choice. She even made polite conversation with Hal, who forgot how to swallow halfway through and had to be smacked on the back by Clutch. Then, just as dessert, consisting entirely of cube-shaped jelly organisms, was served, Torga tilted her head. "You know," she said softly, "it's funny how many credits are being offered for a royal corpse these days." Silence. Glocks didn't blink. "Is that a threat?" Taggart asked, voice flat. Torga smiled sweetly. "An observation." She stood. Her fingers moved quickly across the device hidden on her belt. The lights flickered. The room's fire suppression system hissed to life, spraying the table with a mist of antifungal foam. Then came the explosion. The side wall blew inward, a fireball ripping through the back of the kitchen. Automated ceiling drones screeched and descended, their targeting lasers blinking madly. One of them opened fire on the soup. Taggart grabbed Glocks by the shoulder and yanked him behind the table just as the window imploded. Veek backflipped away, laughing. Clutch hurled a serving tray like a discus. It took out a drone mid-spiral. "In breach!" Nessa shouted, pulling out a compact pulse jammer and slamming it onto the floor. The room went dark again, only backup LEDs flickering in emergency crimson. Taggart shoved Glocks behind an overturned chair. "Move! Hallway exit now!" Glocks didn't argue. He slithered low across the floor with eerie grace. Torga landed beside Taggart, grinning. "Want to dance, soldier?" "I don't dance with bounty hunters." "Good," she said, drawing twin shock blades. "I lead." Taggart blocked her first strike with a chair leg. The second cut a gash across his sleeve. He countered with a knee to the ribs. She laughed and headbutted him. Hal screamed. From the corner, Nessa fired a shot into the ceiling sprinkler system. Water rained down, shorting out one of the drones in a burst of sparks. "That's right," she shouted. "Welcome to hospitality, Red Sky style." Clutch tackled the last drone into a wall and bit it in half. Veek disengaged, hissing. She backed toward the blown-out wall, tapping a device on her wrist. "Next time, I won't be this polite," she said, then vanished in a shimmer of cloaking static. Silence returned, broken only by the sizzling of half-melted jelly cubes and the soft gurgle of coolant leaking from the table console. Taggart wiped blood from his brow. "Everyone okay?" Glock stood, elegant and unbothered. "Your hospitality is lively." Hal collapsed into a chair. "I think I dislocated my panic gland." Nessa walked over and kicked one of the twitching drones. "Well," she said, "next time you plan a dinner party, Hal, maybe don't invite a war criminal." "I just wanted to impress the guest," Hal mumbled. Clutch picked up a half-burnt pudding and began nibbling it contentedly. Glocks folded his hands calmly, eyes glowing just slightly. "We should move." "Why?" Taggart asked. Glocks looked toward the smoking breach in the wall. "Because that," he said, "was a warning shot." The door to the security center slammed shut behind them with a noise like metal regret. Taggart hit the lock override, flipping the entire station into red alert mode. The lights shifted from tired yellow to ominous crimson. Sirens didn't blare because the sirens had been broken for 6 years, but a mildly concerning chime looped from the ceiling like a polite reminder of imminent death. "Lockdown engaged," the station AI droned. "Please do not panic, or do. It is beyond my jurisdiction." Nessa was already jacked into the console, fingers flying across the cracked interface, bypassing half of the diplomatic firewalls with software that probably shouldn't exist. I've sealed the eastern halls, rerouted auxiliary power to the core doors, and scrambled every local network frequency. No one's getting in or out unless they're built like Clutch. Clutch, who was currently inspecting a half-melted drone husk, raised a middle claw in a gesture he'd picked up from Earth cartoons. Hal paced in a tight circle. Okay, so we just survived an assassination attempt. A very dramatic assassination attempt. What do we do now? We make sure it doesn't happen again, Taggart said, holstering his sidearm, which means we find out who's on board, who's helping them, and what they're actually after. Nessa glanced up. You think it's not just Glocks? No, Taggart said. I think it started with him. I don't think it ends there. As if summoned, Glocks glided into the room. The emergency lights made his shimmering skin look like molten metal in motion. I sense a tightening, he said. Of what? Hal asked. Probability. Nessa rolled her eyes. That's comforting. Glocks folded his long fingers. They will come again. Not because I am here, but because what I carry is. What? Your winning personality? Taggart asked. Glocks opened his robe slightly, not enough to be indecent, but enough to reveal a crystalline node embedded in his torso, just below the sternum equivalent. It pulsed slowly with internal light, shifting patterns like fractals dancing through fog. This, Glocks said, is a living archive. It contains evidence. Weapon blueprints, movement logs, names, the kind of things Teradyne United would rather see erased. Taggart stared. Why are you carrying that? Because no one would suspect someone so diplomatic, Glocks said smoothly. Until now. Clutch peered at the crystal. If I bite that, does it explode? Possibly. Clutch nodded respectfully and stepped back. Hal sat down hard in a chair. So now we're not just guarding a prince. We're harboring evidence that could trigger a corporate war. Correction, Nessa said. We're harboring stolen data and a diplomatic figure, and we're currently sealed in a building full of holes with a kill team sniffing around the vents. Taggart exhaled slowly. All right, new plan. We lock down tighter. No signal leaves this station without our approval. We run a sweep of every guest, every crew file, anyone who's passed through in the last 3 days. He turned to Glocks. And you, are there any other surprises I should know about? Glocks tilted his head. Would you prefer a list sorted by threat level or chronological regret? Taggart muttered something unprintable and headed for the corridor. Nessa, keep eyes on every access point. Clutch, with me. Hal, don't touch anything. Too late, Hal whispered. They started the sweep at the cargo wing, moving in careful formation. Clutch checked air vents with his tail limbs. Taggart scanned each room with a handheld dampener, looking for cloaked electronics. This smells like bait, Taggart said, sweeping a crate labeled plant food, do not shake. Everything's too quiet. Then why are we here? Clutch asked. Because sometimes bait bites back. Taggart flipped a panel. Inside, wires, scorch marks, and a small camera. Someone's watching us, he muttered, from inside the station. Back in the security center, Nessa tapped her screen. We've got a tracer, she said aloud to no one, since Hal was hiding under the comms desk. Motion in Sector 5. Biosignature unknown. No comm badge. Guess who? She rerouted the security feed just in time to see a blurry figure slip into the waste disposal shaft. Oh, hell no, she said, slamming the emergency seal. The camera caught just a flicker of movement as a cloaked figure lunged for the closing hatch and failed. The doors slammed shut. Then the power flickered. All over the station, doors rebooted, lights dimmed, the emergency systems faltered, the security console hissed, sparks flew, Nessa jerked back. Someone just hit the power grid from inside. That was a manual override. Taggart's earpiece crackled. Ness? Static. He cursed. Clutch, reroute us, maintenance corridor 4. As they sprinted, Clutch suddenly skidded to a halt. He pointed upward. Hear that? A soft scrape. Something in the walls. Taggart raised his weapon. We've got company. He turned the corner just in time to see a silhouette vanish into a side shaft. He followed. What he didn't see, what none of them saw, was the tiny crab-like drone crawling along the ceiling, scanning, watching, and transmitting. In the suite, Glock sat in silence, hands clasped. Hal peeked from behind the couch. So, does this sort of thing happen often to you? Only when I'm telling the truth. Shouldn't we be, I don't know, evacuating, leaving? Glocks turned his head. And go where? Every place I might run is already waiting for me. Hal swallowed. So what now? Now, Glock said, eyes glowing faintly, we wait for the next wave. Outside the suite, a small blinking device affixed to the outer wall beeped once, then went silent. The silence in the docking control tower was not natural. Red Sky Station, even on its best day, was a concerto of mechanical complaints, wheezing fans, buzzing lights, occasional wet thumps from the wall that no one investigated too closely. But now, as the incoming shuttle drifted into the gravity lock, not a sound escaped the room except the steady beep of an unauthorized docking request. Nessa sat alone in the control chair, boots kicked up, staring at the identification code blinking on the screen. Unregistered diplomatic override. Guess who? She murmured. She tapped a key, and the viewfinder zoomed in on the vessel. Sleek, needle-shaped, the kind of transport used when someone didn't want to be tracked, but still wanted to arrive looking fabulous. Nessa activated the override comm. Incoming vessel, this is Red Sky Embassy Control. You're triggering a priority red lock. You're not on the guest list. Explain or eject. There was a pause. Then the reply came, crisp and purring. Tell Taggart I brought his favorite wine. Nessa didn't need to see the pilot's face to know who it was. Oh, fantastic, she muttered. Psycho Barbie's back. The docking bay hissed open like a sigh from an angry god. Torga Veek stepped onto the deck in full bounty regalia. Her boots clicked with intention. Her hair, now styled into rows of intricate braids, gleamed with metallic threads. She smiled like someone who was about to get everything she wanted, then break it out of boredom. Where's my welcome party? She asked, voice echoing slightly. Taggart stepped into view, arms crossed, a frown carved deep into his face. Didn't think you'd show your face again after the dining room stunt. I left the table early, she said, walking past him. Terrible dessert. He didn't follow immediately. She paused. You know why I'm here, Taggart. You know who sent me. Pterodine? Torga smirked. They pay well. But no, I'm freelance, remember? This isn't business. Taggart's jaw tensed. Then it's personal? Everything with Glocks is personal. She glanced around the hallway. Station looks worse than I remember. You blew a hole in it. I've always had a talent for opening things. He stopped walking. Why are you really here? Torga turned, slower this time. She pulled a slim data chip from her belt and flicked it toward him. He caught it. Evidence dump. Partial. From my original client. Proves they're not the only ones coming. Someone else is on this station. Not here to kill. Here to extract. Taggart inserted the chip into his wrist reader. Images flickered across the display. Fuzzy heat maps, coded messages wrapped, a rough schematic of red sky showing multiple pings near the reactor core. Who are they? I don't know. I call them the Black Vial. Taggart blinked. You just named them? They didn't introduce themselves at the party. She turned and began walking toward the security checkpoint. I want in, not as a shooter, as a guest. Let me talk to him. To Glocks? Torga stopped and looked back. To the only person who ever lied to me. Well, they convened in the embassy briefing room. What passed for one? The screen was cracked. The chairs were mismatched. One had teeth. Glock sat at the head of the table, his shimmer slightly muted under the flickering fluorescence. Hal brought him tea. Clutch brought himself, carrying a crate of replacement security nodes like they were children's blocks. Torga stood against the wall, arms folded, face impassive. So, Glock said, voice a shade cooler than usual. They've sent you again. No, she said. This time I sent myself. A long pause stretched between them. Nessa leaned against a console, chewing on a stylus, eyes darting between them. You carry a wound, Glocks, Torga said, but not the kind that bleeds. You want people to feel sorry, so you build a story, a pretty one. You wear it like a crown, and somehow they keep buying it. You sound jealous, Glocks replied. I'm furious, she said. You lied about the archive. You lied about the truce. And now the galaxy's on fire because you couldn't just stay buried. Glocks tilted his head. I don't intend to die for your convenience. I don't want you dead, Torga said. I want you to choose sides. That's what I'm doing. No, you're choosing chaos and dragging fools behind you. She turned, looked straight at Taggart. You don't know what you're guarding, Lieutenant. This isn't a diplomat. He's a weapon. And if he doesn't burn the galaxy down, someone else will, just trying to get their hands on him. Taggart stared at Glocks. Is that true? Glocks said nothing. Then finally, if I were merely a weapon, would I be so afraid? That silenced the room. An alert flashed on the wall screen. Nessa tapped it. New movement, she said. Sector 6, Bulkhead Junction. Unmarked life form. They're in the walls. Clutch's eyes lit up. I love wall chases. Taggart grabbed his gear. Lock the prince down. Seal the suite. If they want him, they'll have to come through us. Torga's blades hissed out of their sheaths. I told you, she said. I'm staying. Then pick a side, Taggart said. Right now. She smiled without warmth. I already have. Far below them in the station's silent undergut, a figure in obsidian armor crawled through the vent shafts like a shadow given shape. It paused beside a structural beam and placed a device with blinking blue lights. The countdown began. The lights on red sky dimmed again. The next assault was only minutes away. They made it to the recycling sector just as the lights cut again. This time it wasn't flickering. It was total. The kind of black where even sounds huddled close, unwilling to venture too far. Taggart slapped the emergency light on his vest. A dull cone of yellow illuminated swirling steam and walls streaked with grime. Pipes hissed. Floor panels creaked beneath them like they resented being stepped on. Behind him, Nessa muttered, "This place smells like burnt algae and moldy cheese." "It is burnt algae," Clutch said cheerfully, scanning the walls with a cracked sensor unit. "Mostly." Torga walked silently, weapons sheathed but fingers twitching near them. Glocks moved as if untouched by the atmosphere. He didn't walk. He glided, even here, among ancient waste shredders and broken plumbing. "This sector's a dead end," Nessa said. "Only way out is through the vent crawl space, and I wouldn't recommend that unless you're shaped like a coat hanger." "Good," Taggart said. "Bottleneck's easier to defend." He set down a small tripod, a portable dampener field. The emitter hummed to life, pushing out a low, vibrating pulse that jammed local tracking and cloaking devices. Nessa double-checked her pistol. "Still can't believe we're protecting this guy in a glorified garbage chute." Clutch glanced at Glocks. "He is shiny." "He's radioactive," Nessa replied. "Metaphorically. Maybe literally." Glocks sat on an overturned canister. His breathing was calm, measured. Hal, who had insisted on coming along and bringing tea, was crouched behind a broken recycler unit, trying to pour without spilling. "Anyone want a cup before we're all vaporized?" No one responded. Then Glock spoke. "They've been testing me," he said quietly. "Not just today, for weeks. Spies, agents, poisons, bribery. I've resisted." Torga folded her arms. "Why resist? You could have traded that data, made your enemies vanish." "I wanted the truth exposed, not buried deeper." Hal raised a hand, half-hearted. "Just to confirm, what truth exactly?" Glock's eyes shifted color, blue, then violet, then black. "In the final weeks of the war," he said, "a prototype weapon system was deployed. Not by Teradyne alone. By humans, yes, but in alliance with rogue colonies and certain factions from my own world. It was designed to erase, not to kill. Whole cities dissolved into nothing. Time fractures, neural fog, memory corrosion. We called it the silence engine." Everyone was still. "I carry," Glocks continued, "the only living record of its schematics, encoded biologically, in my tissue." Clutch leaned forward, fascinated. "You are dead meat." Glocks gave a slow nod. Taggart paced. "So you're a walking, talking blackmail nuke." "A truth bomb," Glocks said softly. Nessa let out a low whistle. "And everyone wants to disarm you before you go off." Torga didn't speak. Her eyes were unreadable. Taggart leaned against the wall. "Why not destroy it? Burn it out of your system." "Because," Glocks said, "there is no other record, and if I die without revealing it, the same people will try to build it again. I am not the danger. Forgetting is." From somewhere behind the walls, a faint scraping sound echoed. Everyone snapped to attention. Clutch raised his weapon. "They are crawling again." Nessa pulled out her tablet. Multiple pings, encrypted signals. Someone just patched into the old thermal grid. "That's how they're moving. No need for doors when you can ride the heating ducts." Taggart cursed. "How many?" "3. No, 5. At least 5. Torga unsheathed her blades. "They're not here to kill. They're here to pull him out, live." Hal choked slightly on his tea. "That's somehow worse." "Then we don't let them," Taggart growled. He motioned for Clutch to take position by the vent. "You hear movement, you fire. No hesitation." Clutch clicked a few buttons. "I am ready to discourage intruders with extreme persuasion." The room tensed. And then, clang, a metal grate above them popped free. Taggart shot. The beam ricocheted off a dark, glimmering figure mid-leap. Slime. Chaos erupted. The attackers dropped from vents and shadows, armored in matte black, faceless helmets, silent as death. Not Pterodyne, not bounty hunters. Something else. One lunged for Glocks. Torga met them mid-air, blades flashing. The attacker twisted away, lightning fast. Another aimed a tranquilizer rifle. Clutch roared and swatted the shooter across the room like a fly. Taggart pinned one against the wall and yanked off its mask, only to find a mouth sewn shut with silver thread and eyes replaced by lens tech. "What the hell are you?" he hissed. The figure only smiled. More were coming. Nessa tossed a stun grenade into the vent. Flash, boom, screams. Glock stood, radiating with internal glow. He walked into the center of the chaos and raised his hands. The attackers paused, then stumbled, then screamed. As an invisible wave of psychic force slammed into their minds, their helmets cracked. One collapsed, weeping blood. "Glocks, what are you doing?" Hal shouted, but Glocks's eyes were fully black now. His voice became many. "I remember the silence." The attackers fled, just like that. They were gone. Minutes passed before anyone moved again. Taggart holstered his weapon, breathing hard. That wasn't normal. Glocks collapsed to one knee. Hal rushed to him. "You okay? That thing you just did it hurt you?" "Yes," Glocks whispered. "Every time." Torga knelt beside him, not touching, just watching. "You're leaking power. They'll smell it now, all of them. You just lit up the galaxy like a beacon." Glocks nodded, slowly. "I know." Taggart turned to Nessa. "We can't hold him here, not anymore." She already had a plan up on her screen. "There's a maintenance barge docked in Subsector 3, barely flight-worthy, but it'll move." "Destination?" "Anywhere but here." Taggart looked around at the ruined sector, the scattered drones, the walls still echoing with pain. Then he looked at Glocks. "You want to blow the whistle?" he said. "Then we get you off this station alive. We find you a damn microphone." Glocks looked up at him and smiled. The Subsector 3 dock was less a hangar and more a neglected closet that someone had once decided could store small spacecraft, assuming those spacecraft didn't mind rust, leaking pipes, or occasional infestations of blind space maggots. Taggart stared at the maintenance barge, parked dead center. It looked like a drunk refrigerator had mated with a dumpster. Its hull was scored with laser burns, one of its stabilizers was held on with industrial tape, and someone had painted a fanged smile across its bow. Upside down. Nessa emerged from beneath the belly of the thing, grease on her hands and a mechanic's torch dangling from her belt. "It's flyable," she said, "technically. Think of it less like a ship and more like a suggestion." Clutch was inside already, having declared himself pilot by right of previous crashing experience. He waved from the viewport, which was cracked and covered with a mesh of duct tape. Glock stood beside Taggart, watching the scene with an expression of serene detachment. "It is. Humble. It's a flying death trap," Taggart muttered. "But it's the only chance we've got." Hal ran up, lugging a suitcase that was leaking steam. "I packed Glocks's luggage. At least I think it's luggage. It made a sound when I zipped it." "Probably a territorial warning," Nessa said. "Don't pet it." Torga appeared at the far end of the dock, helmet under one arm, gaze sharp. "Pterodyne's going to be scanning outbound lanes the moment they catch wind we're moving. You'll need a diversion." "You volunteering?" Taggart asked. "I'll stay behind," she said simply. "Cause trouble. Look pretty." "You're definitely good at the second part," Nessa muttered. Torga ignored her. "I'll make them think Glocks is still here. You just make sure he doesn't waste the effort." Glocks turned to her. "You don't have to do this." "I'm not doing it for you," she said, then paused. "Well, not entirely." Their eyes met for a long moment, two old knives assessing whether to clash or align. "All right," Taggart snapped. "Get aboard. We've got 10 minutes before someone asks why this thing is heating up its engine without a launch permit." Inside the barge, it smelled like hot oil and expired breath. The controls were analog, patched together with spare parts from 3 different ship models. Clutch was in the pilot's seat, goggles on, all 6 hands on something important looking. "This fly like old cragbird," he said happily. "Unstable, loud, smells of shame. I like." Nessa dropped into the nav chair and plugged her slate into the console. "I've scrubbed our signature, but we can't go far. We're too hot." "Where's cold?" Taggart asked. "Mining belt. Dead moon cluster. Nothing but rocks and failed terraforming." "Perfect," Taggart said. "Plot it. Hal strapped himself into a safety harness made of fraying rope and mumbled a quiet prayer to every deity in the Galactic Cultural Handbook. Glock sat near the rear, eyes closed, humming something soft and layered, a sound that made metal surfaces resonate faintly. Taggart strapped in and tapped the intercom. Clutch? Yes? Don't kill us. No promises. The engines screamed like they were waking up from a nightmare. The barge lurched, shuddered, then rose into the air on a pillar of stuttering propulsion. Docking clamps groaned. One snapped off. Another bent sideways. Releasing clamp authority, Nessa said. Faking departure log. Spinning up sensor mask. Now. The hangar doors creaked open, revealing the station's outer bay, and beyond, the velvet stretch of space, glittering and hostile. Clutch gunned the thrusters. The barge shot forward, tumbling briefly before righting itself. Steady as a narcoleptic mule, Clutch declared. We go! Alarms lit up across Red Sky's comms grid as unauthorized departure protocols triggered. Nessa shut down external pings with a single keystroke. They know we're gone, she said. They don't know where, Taggart replied. Glocks opened his eyes. They will try to find us. They'll try, Taggart said. But this piece of garbage, it's got charm. She'll hold. Hal peeked out the viewport. There's a ship on our tail. Taggart leaned over. Pterodyne? Worse, Hal said. Them. Behind them, a sleek black shape detached from the station's shadow. It glided like a knife through the dark. No lights, no ID, just presence. Shadow drone, Nessa said. Black Veil. They were waiting. Clutch let out a clicking growl. They want Glocks. They follow his blood. Taggart looked to Glocks. Can you hide yourself? I can try. Glocks leaned back, drew his arms inward, and pulsed. The entire ship's wall shimmered for a second, a wave of static rippling through the hull like sound through water. Outside, the drone paused, drifted, twitched, then turned away. Hal exhaled so hard he almost fainted. Nessa checked the readouts. We're clean, somehow. Not somehow, Taggart said, miracle wrapped in skin. Glock slumped in his seat, pale, breathing hard. It won't last, he said. They'll adapt. They always do. We just need a head start, Taggart said. Get to the belt, drop below their scans, then figure out what the hell we do next. Behind them, Red Sky Station receded into darkness, smaller and smaller, until its lights were just another dead star in the void. Glocks watched it fade. So did Torga, from a window high in the station's upper bay, where Pterodyne's forces had just begun to arrive. She turned away from the chaos and smiled. The stars ahead were calm, endless. The ones behind, lit with warnings. The barge wasn't made for long-distance travel. It groaned and coughed and belched heat like a dying animal, but it flew. Clutch kept it steady mostly, although steady in Clutch's hands meant constant shuddering rolls and the occasional sudden drop that made Hal yell in terror and grab at things that weren't seatbelts. Okay, Nessa said from the nav chair, rubbing her temples. We're in the clear. No active trackers, no signatures. We're just a very ugly shadow in the dark. I'm offended, Clutch said. She is ugly only on outside. You say that like it's better. Taggart ignored them both. He stood at the rear of the cabin watching Glocks, who hadn't moved in nearly 20 minutes. The alien's skin was dimmer than usual, less like a living light and more like polished stone. His breathing was shallow. Not slow, shallow. You all right? Taggart asked. Glocks opened one eye. Just reassembling. My cells are still reverberating from the emission. That psychic flashback thing you did? Yeah, about that. Taggart crossed his arms. You didn't mention you were a weaponized telepath. I didn't mention it, Glock said, because I did not become one until desperation required it. Next time, lead with that. Next time, Glocks murmured, I might not be able to stop. That silenced him. Hal drifted over, holding a nutrition pouch in a determined look. I brought you food, or at least chemically adjacent nourishment. Glock smiled weakly. Thank you. Hal sat down beside him quietly. I believe you, by the way, about the silence engine, about all of it. That is both kind and extremely dangerous. It's still true. Glocks looked at him with something unreadable in his eyes. Then you are either brave, Halford or profoundly stupid. Can't it be both? Hal said brightly. Almost always is, Taggart muttered from the corner. Then the ship shuddered. Nessa sat bolt upright. That wasn't us. Clutch flipped a control switch, cursed in 3 languages. We are being pinged. External lock. What kind of lock? Taggart snapped. Tractor beam, Nessa said. From behind. New contact. Large ship. Very large. Visual, Taggart ordered. The screen flickered. A massive vessel slid into view, gunmetal gray, bristling with comms arrays and weapons mounts. Its insignia, the Pterodyne United logo, sharp and elegant like a signature forged in blood. Well, Nessa said, the frying pan noticed us. The barge jolted again, being reeled in like a fish caught on a corporate hook. Clutch banged the console. We cannot outthrust it. No burn will break that grip. Suggestions? Taggart asked. Nessa glanced around the cabin. I have 3 half-baked ideas and a stun grenade. Taggart turned to Glocks. Can you do the thing again? Glocks shook his head. If I try, I may destroy the ship. And myself. Great. So plan B? Which one's plan B? Hal asked nervously. The kitchen sink, Taggart said. Nessa's eyes lit up. Oh gods, you're serious. Taggart was already moving to the aft hold. Clutch, ready the manual ejection clamps. Nessa, prep a false ignition burst. Hal, stay out of the way. Hal followed anyway. They reached the storage compartment at the back of the barge, where non-essential equipment was stored. Junk, hoses, leftover panels, and inexplicably, the remains of an old galley unit, including a rusted unused kitchen sink, bolted to a half pallet. You literally meant the kitchen sink, Hal said. Pterodyne's sensor arrays are visual and mass-based. If we vent this junk at the right moment, spike the heat signature, they'll think we tried to self-destruct. And then? Then we actually self-destruct, Nessa said, tossing him a shock collar. Figuratively. Clutch howled with glee. This plan is idiocy. I love it. Minutes later, the cargo hold pressurized and hissed open. The barge, still gripped in the tractor beam, rolled just slightly, giving the ejection hatch perfect line of sight. Taggart gripped the release lever. Ready on my mark. The lights dimmed. The grip of the tractor field intensified. 3, 2, 1, now! The cargo launched. Scrap metal, broken chairs, synthetic upholstery, and a half-century-old kitchen sink shot into space in a spinning, flaming cluster. At the same time, Clutch fired the port engine at 73%, just enough to dislodge the beam's harmonic grip, but not enough to blow the drive. Pterodyne's lock wavered. Their ship adjusted course. Sensors blinked. The kitchen sink exploded on impact with their forward shield, throwing up a satisfying flare. Nessa rerouted the barge's heat signature through a vented coolant pipe and then cut power entirely. From Pterodyne's perspective, the vessel had just gone up in flames and scattered itself across the void. Silence. The massive ship held position for a moment, then drifted on. Back aboard the barge, emergency lighting flicked on. Everyone held still, breathing shallow. Then Hal let out a weak laugh. We're alive! We're alive! Clutch pounded the wall with joy. We fooled them with garbage. Our garbage is mighty. Nessa collapsed into her chair. I need a drink or 6. Glocks looked at Taggart. That was bold. Taggart exhaled, slumping against the bulkhead. That was stupid. Glocks' eyes gleamed faintly. The two are not mutually exclusive. They drifted now, invisible in a drift, hidden in a dead zone of dark matter and old mining fields. Pterodyne would be back. The black veil wouldn't stop. But for the moment, they had space. They had breath, and they had each other. Next stop, Taggart muttered, a rock we can land on that doesn't try to kill us. I know one, Nessa said. You won't like it. Perfect, he replied. The colony on Dustmoth was not on any star map that mattered. It orbited a half-dead mining planet that no longer rotated, lit on one side by endless sunlight and on the other by endless freeze. The colony clung to the twilight strip like a stubborn fungus, built out of salvaged cargo crates, stripped haulers, and whatever hadn't been bolted down elsewhere in the galaxy. The barge limped in under cover of the asteroid debris belt, silent and unscanned. Nessa had jiggered the ID tags to read as postal maintenance, which was apparently so uninteresting that the colony's orbital AI just yawned and waved them through. Taggart peered through the cracked viewport. Beautiful, he said, in the way tetanus is beautiful. Nessa keyed in a docking override, and the barge jerked into a landing bay shaped like a rusted tin can with delusions of grandeur. We've got 5 hours before the coolant loops freeze solid. After that, she's not leaving. Perfect, Taggart muttered. Let's make friends. Dustmouth lived up to its name. The air was dry and grit-thick, the sky a permanent hazy mauve, like bad wine. Every surface felt sticky. The moment they stepped off the barge, 3 separate merchants tried to sell them counterfeit breathing masks, a second-hand goat, and a sentient candle that hissed insults in 14 languages. Clutch tried to buy the candle. Nessa stopped him. Hal was nearly pickpocketed by a child with 3 arms and a grenade tattooed on his forehead. Glocks, by contrast, walked untouched, unbothered. People looked at him, curious, wary, but no one approached. Perhaps they sensed something deeper. Or maybe they just didn't like radiant beings who hummed softly and carried doom in their chest. Their destination was the Grind Den, a semi-legal establishment carved into the husk of a mining crawler, known for hosting the kind of contacts who didn't ask for last names, or first ones. Inside, it was chaos, a mix of music, smoke, alien languages, and blood sport. In one pit, a pair of cybernetically enhanced ferrets were dueling over a bottle of whiskey. In another, a glass-eyed bouncer was holding a screaming diplomat by the ankles. Taggart glanced at Nessa. "You sure your contact's still breathing?" "She's breathing. Mostly solvent-dependent, but breathing." They found her in a booth behind a veil of plastic beads and muttering curses, an old human woman with hair like steel wool and a cybernetic eye that pulsed with slow colors. "Name's Malfi," Nessa said, dropping into the booth. "Used to run supply routes through unclaimed space, now runs her mouth and maybe a few data fences." Malfi squinted at the group. "Nice crew. Looks like someone's bad idea of a diplomatic bomb squad." "We aim to displease," Taggart said. Malfi lit something with too many wicks and inhaled. "What do you want?" "Transit to a relay hub, quietly, and maybe a name." "Who's paying?" Taggart nodded toward Glocks. Malfi blinked slowly. "You brought a glow-stick prince into Dustmouth? That's bold. Or suicidal, possibly both." "He's more than a prince," Hal said. "He's—" Taggart cut him off. "He's a package, that's all." Malfi exhaled smoke shaped like punctuation. "I might know someone who can get you off-world. Might, but you'll have to pay." Nessa frowned. "With what?" Malfi smiled. "Fuel, weapons, or blood?" "I vote fuel," Hal said quietly. Malfi held up a chipped comm bead. "Go to the pit fights. Win 3 rounds. The champion gets a shipment of reactor cores. Sell those, you've got your ride." Clutch perked up. "I like pit fights." Taggart grimaced. "You would." The pit was a dugout dome beneath the colony's center, reeking of sweat, oil, and fermented adrenaline. Crowds howled from the railings above. A scoreboard flickered uncertainly between numbers and lewd animations. Clutch stepped into the ring and immediately headbutted the starting bell. His first opponent was a 6-legged lizard wearing a power harness and screaming obscenities in click-tongue. It lasted 20 seconds. The second was a hulking robot called Jeff. Jeff tried to hug Clutch into submission. Clutch bit off Jeff's arm and threw it into the crowd. The third match was less a fight and more a physics experiment, an amorphous blob that emitted sonic attacks. Clutch shoved a fistful of gravel down its emitter and sat on it. The crowd roared. Money changed hands. The reactor cores were delivered in a small anti-grav crate, humming with latent radiation. Taggart carried the prize back to Malfi's booth. "We did your work." She nodded. "I got your ride. Freight hauler leaves at dusk, doesn't ask questions." "Neither do we," he said. "You should." Back at the barge they regrouped. Glock sat cross-legged near the open crate of cores, his skin glowing faintly in resonance with their hum. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. "What else is new?" Nessa asked. "No," Glock said. "Something beneath us. It's listening." Taggart froze. "You mean surveillance?" "No," Glock said. "Presence. Familiar." Hal turned wide-eyed. "You don't think?" The barge shook. Hard. Then again, Clutch stood, weapons drawn. "They found us." "Impossible," Nessa said. "We were off-grid." "They weren't tracking the ship," Taggart said. "They were tracking him." Outside, the colony lights went dark. A ship began to descend. Silent. Black. No insignia, just like the one before. Glock stood, cloak trailing behind him. "They're here." The silence after the lights died was sharp and deep, as if the whole colony had taken one massive breath and forgotten how to let it go. Dustmouth's usual din, raucous laughter, clanking doors, slurred arguments, vanished. What remained was the low hum of fear and the soft hiss of the barge's venting coolant, ticking like a nervous watch. "Shields up," Taggart barked, checking his sidearm. "Clutch, lock the ship. Nessa, scramble the ID tags again." Already moving, Nessa tapped her wrist pad. "Too late for disguise. They're not here to scan. They're here to take." Clutch sealed the outer hatch with an almost reverent slam. "We could fight." Taggart glanced at Glocks. "We don't fight. Not here. Too many civilians. Too many eyes." Hal hovered uncertainly by the inner airlock. "What do we do then?" We stall, Taggart said, and we lie. The ship outside landed without a sound. No hiss of atmosphere, no landing gears screeching against the metal pad. It just was suddenly, and then its boarding ramp began to descend. A figure stepped out, tall, wrapped in matte armor that seemed to absorb light, its face covered by a featureless mask. It moved with a smooth, fluid grace, like gravity wasn't entirely committed to the arrangement. Then another emerged, and another. 3 in total, silent, waiting. Nessa whispered, "They're not Black Veil." "No," Glocks murmured, "there's something older." Taggart stepped out first, hands raised. "We're private cargo, licensed hauler, no cargo manifest for inspection, no violation of interstellar trade." One of the figures raised a hand. A hologram flickered to life. Glocks's face. "Damn it," Taggart finished. The lead figure spoke. Its voice wasn't heard so much as felt, like an internal vibration. "You carry that which is forbidden." Taggart didn't flinch. "We're diplomatic escort. You carry that which was meant to be forgotten." Nessa stepped forward, half shielding Glocks. "You show up unannounced, uninvited, and you're quoting cryptic space prophecy. I'm not impressed." The figure tilted its head, almost amused. "We offer no war. We offer amnesia." Behind them, Glock stirred. "They are called the Null, ancient archivists. They erase." Clutch grinned. "I erase too, but with more screaming." Glocks walked forward, slowly. "What do you want?" The lead Null lifted its hand again. A soft pulse spread across the ground, rippling through stone and air alike. "You remember too well. You must be unmade." Hal stepped beside him. "You'll have to go through all of us." Taggart muttered, "Not helpful." The Null advanced. Then a shot rang out. The lead figure's shoulder sparked. Something had pierced its armor. Everyone turned. Torgavik emerged from the shadows behind the fuel tower, rifle slung from her hip, eyes glinting. "Amnesia's a hell of a drug," she said. "But I'm a bigger fan of spite." The Null turned to face her. Taggart used the moment. "Back into the barge, now!" Clutch tackled Glocks through the hatch. Nessa dragged Hal by his collar. Taggart laid down suppressing fire, mostly noise and flash, not damage, but enough to buy seconds. Torga sprinted after them, flipping the ignition switch on a grenade as she vaulted into cover. The grenade went off in a pulse of sonic energy, flattening every thin wall building for 20 meters. It didn't destroy the Null, but it confused them. They froze, recalibrating, twitching like static on bad glass. Inside the barge, Nessa sealed the hatch. "I'm guessing we're not waiting for dessert." "No," Taggart said. "We're skipping straight to regret." Clutch pushed the barge into lift. It groaned, cracked, then rose with reluctant urgency. Outside, the Null watched them go, expressionless, unmoving. Torga stood at the edge of the pad, rifle hanging loose, watching the barge rise into the dusted sky. She didn't wave. Inside, the barge shook violently. "Something's wrong with the nav," Nessa said, teeth gritted. "This wasn't interference. This was inside." Taggart turned. "What do you mean inside?" She tapped into the comm buffer. "Someone's been transmitting logs, daily. From this ship. Location, bioscans, movement." Hal turned white. I didn't know. I didn't mean to." Everyone stared at him. "I thought it was just status reports. I didn't realize they were going everywhere. I was trying to help Earth Command understand." Glock stood. Hal flinched, but Glock's only looked tired. "You were trying to be a good diplomat. You succeeded. Now the whole galaxy knows where I am." Taggart walked up to Hal. "Is it still transmitting?" Nearly crying, I checked his slate. "No. I deleted the relay. I swear." "Then shut up," Taggart said, and walked away. Nessa sighed. "Betrayal quota for the day, maxed." Glocks leaned against the bulkhead. "They'll be waiting at the next stop." "We know," Taggart said. "That's why we're not going to any stop." He looked out at the void. "We're going to vanish." The barge's fusion coils coughed, caught, and flatlined 2 minutes out from Dustmouth. Clutch tried to respark the drive with a bite and a prayer. Neither worked. Nessa slammed her hands on the console. "We've got 20 minutes before every tracker in the sector triangulates us off waste heat alone. We stay up here, we die." "So we go down," Taggart said. "One last time." Glock stirred. "Down to what?" "Dustmouth's dead half," Nessa replied. "Pre-terraform ruins, old smelter colonies from before the atmosphere pumps failed. Now it's caves, tunnels, slag, rot, even pirates avoid it." Clutch grinned. "My kind of place." They crash-landed with more noise than grace, skimming a cliffside and gouging through 30 meters of glassified terrain before skidding to a stop inside what had once been a heat exchanger hangar. The barge hissed, smoked, died, and so began the last stand. The abandoned smelter was a labyrinth of broken conveyor belts, rust-choked shafts, and slag vats that still reeked of scorched iron. Shadows moved without prompting. The silence felt alive. "This place gives me the creeps," Hal whispered, hugging himself. "It is creepy," Taggart said. "Let's weaponize that." They started with the entrances. Clutch sealed one tunnel with an explosive charge made from compressed coolant and hope. Nessa laced the ventilation ducts with trip sensor grenades. Hal, desperate to be useful, rigged a series of decoy beacons using pieces of the barge's defunct entertainment unit. Taggart found a corner with a good view of the central approach and laid out the old ambassador's weapons crate they'd stolen back on Red Sky. Armor piercing, pulse scatter, beam spikes, and one completely unlabeled object with a warning in 6 languages. "What does it do?" Hal asked. "If we need it," Taggart said, "we'll find out." Night fell, or what passed for night on the twilight strip. The sky turned bruised purple. Distant storm flashes lit the clouds. Then came the null. Not in a ship this time. They walked, dozens of them in tight formation, silent, precision incarnate. They advanced down the ravine toward the smelter with the patience of a slow death. Taggart saw them first. "Positions," he said over comms. Clutch growled. Nessa flipped a switch. The smelter's old lighting system surged to life. Blinding, flickering, unreliable. Perfect. They'd turned the entire complex into a trap. One big, ugly, desperate snare. The null entered the main hall, and then the screaming started. A grenade ripped through the first rank, scattering light and heat. Trip mines shredded the flanks. Clutch dropped onto one from the ceiling and drove a spike through its chest. But they didn't scream or bleed. They adapted. The next wave came in faster. Synchronized, they bypassed the mines, started climbing the walls. Nessa fired into a cluster. "They're learning!" Taggart kicked over a table and fired a beam spike directly into a null's torso. It staggered, twitched, kept coming. "They're not built to die easy," he muttered. Hal retreated to the core chamber, guarding Glocks with a stolen energy pistol that pulsed uncertainly in his hands. "You'll have to use it," Glocks said, not looking at him. "I don't want to kill anyone." "You might not have a choice." Hal's jaw clenched. Then the lights died again. For a few seconds, everything was pitch black. Then came the shimmer, not from the null, but from Glocks. He rose, his entire body now glowing with internal light, every line of his skin etched with fractal data. It pulsed like a living frequency. A message made flesh. The null hesitated. That was enough. Taggart, Nessa, and Clutch regrouped near the core chamber. "We can't hold them," Nessa said. "They're endless." "No," Glock said. "They're bound." He stepped forward, arms raised. "I remember the silence," he said, voice ringing like a bell across the chamber, "and I forbid it." Then he opened his chest, not physically but energetically. The crystal embedded there, hidden under skin and light, emerged fully, spinning, radiating, singing. The null staggered. One by one they fell to their knees, caught in a psychic resonance loop. Their armor vibrated, their helmets cracked, some wept. Taggart watched, stunned. "He's overriding them. They're data-born," Nessa breathed. "He's speaking in their language." The smelter groaned. Too much energy, too much interference. It would implode soon. Glock's turned, still glowing. "You need to go, now." "We're not leaving you," Hal said. "Yes," Glocks replied softly, "you are." The structure cracked. Light erupted from the walls. Glocks turned to Taggart, smiled faintly. "Thank you for the noise." And then, white. Later, much later, Taggart came to, was quiet again. No null, no smelter, just slag and silence. Beside him, Nessa stirred, Clutch groaned. Hal sat staring at the horizon, tears drying on his face. Glocks was gone. No trace, no body, no signal. Just a single pulse of data embedded in their ship's comm logs. A farewell, a beginning. They drifted in orbit for 3 days. The barge was running on fumes, patched together with molten scrap and leftover faith. Clutch welded the door shut with a coffee can. Nessa rigged the nav from a gambling console she'd stolen on Dustmouth. Taggart stitched a hole in his vest with wire. Hal didn't speak much. None of them did. They waited, half expecting the null to return, or Pterodyne, or some new monstrosity sent to erase the last witnesses. But nothing came. Just silence. Then, finally, a ping. A real one. An official diplomatic rescue signal, sourced from an Earth fleet vessel on long-range patrol. The kind of ping that required acknowledgement, identification, and the reading of protocols in triplicate. Taggart groaned. "Give me the damn tablet." Hal handed it over. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. The screen lit up. Unregistered diplomatic vessel. Identify crew, cargo, and mission intent. Nessa leaned over his shoulder. "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth," Taggart said. "Which version?" He smirked. "The one where we're heroes." They landed in Earth's orbital port 5 hours later to a reception line of confused bureaucrats, mildly curious brass, and one very panicked assistant diplomat holding a latte and a clipboard. Taggart led the crew down the ramp like it was a catwalk. Behind him, Hal tried to tuck his shirt in and look vaguely functional. Clutch wore a floral shirt someone had given him. Nessa had already hacked the port's public Wi-Fi and was bidding on her own wanted poster. The diplomat approached, blinking rapidly. "You are Lieutenant Taggart?" "That's what it says on the badge. We received your data packet. The Glock's material. It's caused a bit of a stir." "Good," Taggart said. "It should. Teradyne is under investigation. The Galactic Concord's calling an emergency hearing. No one's admitting they exist, but intelligence is reconsidering that position." "Also good." The diplomat looked overwhelmed. "And your mission report includes nearly 30 violations of interstellar law, 17 breaches of conduct, and 2 confirmed barge crashes. Only one of those was technically my fault. And yet," the man continued, checking his slate, "you and your team have been recommended for Priority 1 clearance, effective immediately." There was a pause. Nessa blinked. "We've been promoted?" The diplomat smiled thinly. "You're now official galactic assets. Welcome to the big leagues." Clutch whooped and tackled Hal in a hug. "We are important." Hal wheezed, pinned. Taggart turned toward the ship, looked up at the stars. "You sure this isn't a mistake?" Nessa asked quietly. "Oh, definitely," Taggart replied. "But if they're stupid enough to give us power, we might as well enjoy the view," she finished. Later that night, in a corner of the station's bar, the crew gathered around a table lit by soft blue light, drinks in hand, a sense of something unspoken between them. Not peace, but something close. Hal raised a glass. To Glocks. They all lifted theirs. Clutch said he was shiny. Nessa said he was trouble. Taggart said he was right. They drank. And somewhere, deep in an untraceable relay, a data burst echoed across forgotten channels. A whisper, a signal, not a memory, a choice.